Hello, everyone, and welcome to Road to Reason. I'm Rick Wingrove.
Hi, and I'm Elizabeth Cornwell. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about what makes us angry, and is anger something that should be in the secular movement? I don't know about you, but Rick, how often do you have somebody tell you or ask you, why are you so angry? You atheists are always so angry.
Always angry. Well, I'll cop to that. I got some anger, and I'll tell you why, too. I'm angry about Congress. I'm angry that the traffic cops in our area treat my neighborhood like an ATM. I'm angry that nobody from Wall Street went to jail. And I'm really angry that on the night that the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, I had to be in church.
That probably explames your atheism right there.
That explains
You're just angry
right?
against God.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of times, I don't know about other people out there, but I'm often asked, well, what upset you about God that you don't believe in God anymore? And I have to answer, well, it's not that I was angry at God, I just couldn't fathom that God existed. And it has nothing to do with anger. But I do get angry.
What makes you angry?
I get angry about the fact that children are denied an education because of the interference of religion. And Congress is not doing their job. So I'll go back with you on the angry at Congress. There are times, here in DC, we're often walking around the mall. I don't know how often you do, but I sometimes want to grab Congress and take them to the Jefferson Memorial and take them to the Lincoln Memorial and have them read the Constitution again and think about what they're doing and why they're not getting a job done.
Well, they are kind of dropping the ball. They're allowing, religious groups to just whittle away at our educational system. And of course, the big culprit is creationism and groups like the Discovery Institute, who have as their goal the destruction of the teaching of evolution, the actual science, and supplanting that with the ridiculous biblical creationism fable.
Yeah.
And they're very forthright about it too.
Oh yeah, they're perfectly honest about it. They don't want evolution taught or real science taught in school. And whenever I see a child, if I go to the zoo, or my background's in biology, and the world just becomes such a more beautiful place, understanding how biology works and how evolution works, to be able to watch a pair of birds and understand just the way that if the male is brightly colored and the female is drab, I can understand their mating system just from that little bit of information. And to me, to deny that to children or to anyone is a shame. It makes me really, really angry. But I want to talk a little bit more about anger. Being accused of being the angry atheist. Are we angrier than most other people? Do we use anger maybe too much or not enough? What do you think?
Well, it's understandable, and there have been essays written about it online where people say, angry? Well, yeah, we'll cop to some anger, but we have some very good reasons, Let's start with the Inquisition. I'm a little pissed about the Inquisition, It's mostly over, but the church literally had a license to kill for most of 1,500 years. We were hunted for bounty for 1,500 years. So that we're coming out of that age now, but there's still a lot of residual anger. So
yeah, in terms of anger as from a psychological perspective, anger is an emotion like fear, love. These are emotions that motivate us to do something. That's why emotions are a good thing to have. But from my perspective, sustained anger can be dangerous. That it's good to have that initial anger, to have it motivate you to make change, to not run away from the problem, because that's the other thing we can do, fight or flight, but to motivate us to do something, which is a lot what the organizations that I know you are involved in and I'm involved in do. And it's important for people to use that anger, I think, to make themselves become more vocal.
Right. Anger can't be the end. It needs to be, as you say, a motivator. It needs to get action started. and rational response, rational action.
And you do a lot of work with the American Atheists.
Yes.
And they're sort of, their brand, their firebrand is to be sort of in a way, the angry atheist, to be the really outspoken, in-your-face atheist. And
Right. And you know, I tend to think of it as being modeled on, and I don't know if this is conscious or purposeful, but I think of it as the ACT UP model from the 70s, 80s. When ACT UP, their motto was, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." And there needs to be, for them, there needed to be that component. Of course, there's the need to have people in Congress or in legislatures doing that kind of work and building slowly, working within the system. But a lot of times, it's the squeaky wheel that gets noticed. And I think a huge part of the progress was by that level of anger, that level of street theater, being out there for people to see. It helped normalize the gays, and I think it's also helping normalize atheists.
I mean, we saw the same sort of thing in both the feminist movement and the civil rights movement. So social movements tend to have this need then for both the anger side as well as the cooperative, let's work together side. I think both components are really, really important. In the civil rights, you had Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King, where
Right.
Martin Luther King was the let's all work together, and Malcolm X, of course, the very defiant Black Panther type activism, which I do believe was really important because you needed to express that sort of anger and make people really sit up and take notice.
Right, but the anger, in those situations, certainly with Martin Luther King, I'm sure the man experienced anger. He's made out of DNA, but he channeled it and left that behind and focused on solutions, as did Gandhi. I don't know if he actually felt anger, but
I can't imagine. I would imagine if he's human, I imagine we all feel
too.
We all feel anger. And what does worry me sometimes, though, is when we express this anger to people that drives them away from the secular movement. They may think that's you have to be angry in order to be part of the secular movement, and sometimes anger isn't appropriate because it prevents dialogue back and forth. So it's finding that balance of when we can be angry and when we need to kind of reach out and talk to people.
Exactly. And, I know where it came from. I tell this story often. When I got my first computer, the first thing I did was get online. Even before it was online, it was bulletin boards. And I went out there looking for atheists. Found them in about 2 minutes on CompuServe, and it was a very active.
I remember CompuServe. That dates us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, gosh.
It was a very active atheist board. For a while, it was like the original one and was very active. And of course, we were accused of being angry all the time. We were adamant. We were certainly adamant, and we certainly didn't always display perfect patience with people who just didn't get where we were coming from, or could not even acknowledge the true existence of atheists. And so we got that reputation, although I think most of it was not warranted.
Yeah, well, and I think too with people who are in a position where they can't express their own beliefs and feel repressed and become angry at the fact that they're excluded. Atheists are often excluded from so many activities.
Well, the feeling of oppression will breed anger, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of people who are religious, they simply just don't understand what it's like for us to feel excluded at certain events. And such as when people are talking about how to cope with tragedy, they never think of things from an atheist perspective. They only think about it from a religious perspective. And that was recent with the Oklahoma tornadoes. There was that clip with Wolf Blitzer interviewing this woman who had lost everything, escaped barely with her life with her 18-month-old child. And he said, "Oh, you must be very thankful to the Lord." And she sort of did this, actually, I'm an atheist. Much to her credit, which you could tell she was somewhat uncomfortable of
Right.
announcing that, but at the same time, I mean, good for her. She
Yeah, very good for her.
It was pretty funny, and to be able to have that perspective, because they always go in for these when these tragedies occur. They talk about where the church was destroyed, as if somehow the tornado should have avoided the church, and the poor. Isn't this so tragic when you see homes all over just scattered into pieces?
Right. Interesting side note about the Oklahoma Atheist was that somebody set up a fund for her on one of these
Yeah, I
one
saw
of the
that.
sites. I forget the name of it, and collected money. And last time I looked, it was over $100,000.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll help her build a new home. Hopefully, it would be interesting to contact her and see if she's had any repercussions from. Oklahoma is not known as one of the most progressive states when it comes to atheism.
No.
But-
even though Oklahoma City has a meetup with over 1,100 members.
Well, I think that's true with any place that Richard Dawkins goes to give lectures. Whenever we go to traditional fundamentalist states, the red states, the southern states, and places like Oklahoma and Texas, that's where we get our largest crowds. And that's where we get people who are really touched by the fact that Richard is there, but more impressed with the number of people that show up, that they can look across and see somebody maybe for the first time that they know thinks the way they do.
Right.
And they feel so isolated in these little towns where they are afraid to talk about their atheism, and they do feel incredibly
Oppressed.
excluded. Yeah,
and excluded.
excluded.
And I've heard Dave Silverman and others say the same thing. The crowds you get in the South are far bigger than you would expect when you look
Right.
at a red and blue map.
Yeah,
and you
no,
see that swath of red. They're down there. They're a minority, but they're a large minority.
They are large, and we're a growing minority. And the more that people realize that we're out there and that it's an okay option to be an atheist.
And that is the message that is slowly getting out. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to come out.
It's okay to come out. That's right.
And the numbers are growing.
But the that angry atheist emblem that we tend to carry, do you think that can change over time as we do start coming out and start?
Again, I think it's a little overblown. But if you want to just concede, okay, there is some anger, but there's plenty of reason for it. And you talked about exclusion. One of the ways we get excluded is, of course, any time we're anywhere where there's the pledge.
Right.
You're confronted with that. This once upon a time patriotic oath, which only the Jehovah's Witness had a problem with it, basically, but to whatever extent that's true. But then they converted it. By an act of Congress, they made it a religious oath. And
Right.
so we're confronted with either not saying it, or what we do sometimes is where they say under God, we say under the Constitution, or some people just skip that part and
Just
proceed
kind of
on and get the whole thing out of sync.
Because I remember as a child reciting it, it became meaningless. I always found it, because you recite it every day, the words just sort of all blended together. It was just something you did by rote.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder how much of an impact that is. And I think that's a good question about what atheists need to work toward, what secular movement needs to work toward. There are those who become very upset about the Boy Scouts and about In God We Trust and having 10 Commandments on walls. And then for me, what I find really important are things such as education and education.
Yeah.
And I am less interested in those, the movement being involved in things of, taking the 10 Commandments down. I understand it, but it's not where I put my efforts into. I'm much more concerned of what's actually being taught in schools, and that science education is allowed to be taught in schools, and to keep creationism out of our public schools.
Right, and the anti-intellectualism that is implicit in this, the fact that teachers are being treated as bad guys. And it all, I think, largely stems from not just the creationism movement, but largely because of it. And because of that, because of creationism, all of education becomes suspect if it's involved with science. So by extension, math becomes suspect. Any science becomes suspect. And teachers begin taking a bad rap. And this is just the beginning of a slippery slope, I hate to use that phrase,
this is the
of anti-intellectualism. You know, there's history, there's a track record of that. We don't have to guess that this is true. There's history of just horrible anti-intellectualism.
Yeah, it is interesting that with education, we're seeing this expanded. We saw this in Texas, right? It wasn't, you know, they already pushed evolution out, so now they were going after the history books and rewriting history. Now that made me really angry. Having Jefferson pushed aside and having you know, words like democracy removed because it was too close to the word Democrat.
Right.
Things that
Christianist revisionism is what this is.
Now that gets my blood boiling. I want to throw something, you know, through a wall.
Right.
I want to pick up.
Yeah, and to watch this happen basically on TV every day, where they're just tearing it down and just in everybody's face.
Yeah, and then every
who's
time,
going to stop them?
Every time a congressman stands up or congresswoman stands up and says something about God, I again just can
cringe.
feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Well, we need to learn to call them on it. It needs to be embarrassing.
It needs to be embarrassing again, because and that's where we've forgotten our history. During the Nixon-Kennedy debates, that again dates a lot of us. I was alive, but I don't actually remember the Kennedy-Nixon debates. But there was no discussion about who was a greater believer. In fact, what ended up happening, because John F. Kennedy's family is Catholic, he had to actually speak in front of ministers in Texas to talk about how his religion took the back burner, that it was not going to influence his decisions. He wasn't going to be listening to the Pope in making decisions about how we were going to run our country. And that's changed. Now we have politicians proud to say, I listen to God, I listen to my pastor. And
just the other day, God saved John Boehner's job because several Republicans said, no, God spoke to him and said, don't kick him out. And you know,
I like the idea of Congress, of our Congress hearing voices.
Oh yeah, that's very comforting.
Their imaginary friends.
That's confidence inspiring. But one of the things that makes me mad as an atheist is the utter disregard and denial of separation of church and state. Yeah. They just plain don't consider it a settled thing. It's temporary at best. And there are groups out there, you don't have to look very hard online to find groups that are straight up proponents of certainly a Christian nation. They already claim it's already true. It ticks me off no end to hear somebody say, oh, our legal system based on the Ten Commandments. Not true even a little bit.
Yes, I mean, when you say the best way to handle that is, you know, you go through each of the commandments.
Exactly.
Ask them, which we've done here on the show, but you ask them, is this part of the legal system? No, absolutely not. I mean, the only ones are thou shalt not murder, and even that.
That's a humanist principle.
And that's human, but even the thou shall not murder, that's only murder members of your own tribe. Genocide's okay.
Yeah, genocide's fine.
Genocide's fine. So this whole misunderstanding of our historic past and how the United States came to be a nation with this great experiment of separation of church and state all goes back to England and the wars throughout Europe, the very bloody wars throughout Europe that lasted eons, Protestants killing Catholics and vice versa, Protestants killing other Protestants. And
religion was a license to kill for over 1,000 years.
And it had a seat of power in government. And it was because of that, Cromwell, a Protestant who had so many Catholics slaughtered under his vision of the world he wanted. Our founding fathers, that history was something that they lived with.
Yeah, it was recent to them.
It was recent to them. It was their grandparents and great-grandparents who had been slaughtered in these battles, or driven out, or lost their wealth and their land, and these kind of things went back and forth all the time. And that history was very important to our founding fathers, and we've forgotten that. We've forgotten how horrible it was for people of a differing religion.
Right. James Madison, of course, was all about not just separation, but also being forced to support with your tax monies a religion that was not your own.
Right. He was actually a stronger proponent. As strong as Jefferson was, Madison was maybe even stronger, but he didn't have quite the personality of Jefferson. But
well, we're fortunate. Our founders, when they had the opportunity here, a clean sheet of paper, the first thing they did on the Bill of Rights was to make sure we never had an official religion.
Right.
One thing is clear, people kind of, on the religious side, when they're denying and discrediting, they dance all around it. They try to finesse it and cheat the language, but the facts are clear that official religion was the one thing they wanted to keep out of here.
Right. And of course, in the Tripoli.
Tripoli, the Treaty of Tripoli.
Treaty of Tripoli, Washington wrote after he was president, and it was signed off by Congress, and it clearly said, we are not a Christian nation.
Right.
And what's
unanimously ratified by
exactly,
the Senate.
And there was no huge upheaval in the press. People read the press all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is, and there were no huge protests of us not being a Christian nation.
Right.
And that's such a great example to hold up. Here's the first president of the United States who had created this treaty, wrote this treaty up, ratified, and clearly it states we are not a Christian nation.
Well, I use that, of course, when I speak to groups about separation, and I lead into it. I say, what would be great would be if we had a single document by our government that said that under no conditions are we in any way based upon the Christian religion.
Oh,
wait,
here
we
it is.
have
Yeah,
the Treaty
here
of
it is.
Tripoli, which says exactly that, your move.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a great big billboard with, we are not a Christian nation, George Washington.
George Washington.
I think that would be a terrific billboard to have somewhere.
That would be.
And American Atheist does a lot of billboard work.
Yes, they do.
And it gets some
Makes people
controversy.
angry.
It makes people angry. Because there's the other part, the Christians.
Yeah, let's talk about angry Christians.
Let's
a
talk
little
about
bit.
angry Christians and some of the things that have happened with the billboards. I know there's been death threats and some.
Well, the thing about Christians, I kind of understand why they are angry, because for 1,000 years to 1,500 years, they had run of the place. They were the government. And so we get here, we write a constitution that says no special privileges for them. They just get to be, equal rights with everybody else. Well, after a millennium of wealth and privilege and a license to kill, equal is a huge demotion. And they're not happy about it, and they don't consider it settled. So yeah, they're angry, and there's still that built-in assumption of credibility that comes with the religion. Oh, you did it in the name of religion? What do you say to that? The government doesn't say anything to that.
Yeah.
So they get away with literally murder because it's in the name of religion.
Well, I think we need to take a little short break right now, and we'll be right back. So
back
join
in-
us in just a few.
Anderson Cooper, as a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
Gosh, Darlene, it sure is amazing how much we have in common.
I know, Larry. We both love three-car pileups. We both were built in Buffalo.
And we both know wearing safety belts helps save thousands of lives.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
Don't mind Vince. He's getting over a bad breakup.
I know. Janet's picking up the pieces, too. They're in here.
I wish they understood it's all worth it to get people to buckle up.
Hey, lacerated lovebirds, I sense a major crush.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
Talk about head over heels.
Rosita, did you know there's a right way to sneeze? Let's show them, Elmo. Got it. When you feel like your nose needs to give it at you, this is how you act. This is what you do. Lift your arm up high, bend it toward your face. Sneeze right there in the bendy place. Achoo! You can do it with ease. Achoo! That's the right way to sneeze. Thank you.
To learn more about preventing flu, visit flu.gov.
7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's a line of desks more than 4 miles long. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Welcome back to The Road to Reason. We're talking about anger, and both atheist anger, and we're just talking about Christian anger. I've seen some Christian anger. It's I sometimes think of it as the death throes of an era ending, as you mentioned right before break.
I think that's right. A lot of people are sensing that, well, our numbers are certainly growing, and they're certainly becoming aware of it. And I suppose it can be scary. You know, I think talked about how ACT UP said we're here, we're queer, get used to it. Our motto, a little less flashy, is we're here, we're normal, get used to it.
Exactly, yeah, we are. I think that's one of the things that so many people don't understand about atheists. We're just like everybody else, and most people do know atheists.
Yeah, they just don't know who they are.
Who they are. They don't identify. I was on a flight recently, and the woman next to me started chatting. She was very delightful and nice and sweet. And right before we were landing, and so I couldn't have my headphones on and listen to music, she asked me, so do you know the real true meaning of Easter? I thought, oh dear.
Here we go.
Where is this going? Where is this going? I was pretty sure I knew where it was going. And I sort of looked at her and asked, well, you know, what do you mean? And she said, well, it's not about chocolate bunnies and Easter eggs, you know. And I said, oh, you mean about Jesus and coming back from the dead and all that? She goes, yes, have you been saved? I said, I am an atheist. And the look on her face was pretty interesting. She seemed a little shocked. And the first thing she asked me was, well, have you read the Bible? I said, well, actually, yes, in 2 languages, and that's why I really don't believe in any of this stuff.
Right. All those summers, my mother sent me to Vacation Bible School.
It cured you. It cured you.
Yeah.
I've known a few people who were cured of religion through Vacation Bible School and or attending Catholic school. It cured them of any religious belief.
Right. And they're getting pushback on indoctrinating children, but naturally, they're doubling down with things like the Good News Club.
Oh, now that's made me angry.
Yeah.
When I
That's
ordered,
alarming.
When I ordered that book, I of course got it on my iPad, and which was a good thing, because had it been a book, a physical book, I would have thrown it. But I couldn't throw my iPad. But I would have to put it down and walk around the room and calm myself down because it made me so angry. And Catherine Stewart, we've done a lot of, the Richard Dawkins Foundation has done a lot of work with her and getting her to panels and getting her doing speaking engagements and promoting how we fight this. And again, this shows how what we take is, we take the anger, and I was really angry, and redirect that into actually doing some things.
Make it a call to action. Absolutely.
Call to action, and we've done that in Colorado, which is right now the Good News Club is focusing on Denver, Colorado, and we have a call to action, and we are getting people motivated. We've got a small organization growing, a grassroots organization, to try to fight back at the with the Good News Club, and that's what anger is good for. That's what anger motivates us to do. But then we need to put that anger aside and actually get things done.
We need to get things done, and one of the things that helps get things done, and this is not a well, whatever it is, donations to organizations like the Dawkins Foundation and American Atheists and others. That's how stuff gets done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's warm bodies. We need warm bodies. We need people being out visible and vocal, unashamed, unafraid. And, but it takes money. The other side that's currently doubling down so hard are extremely well funded. So it's easy for them to channel their anger into action.
Oh gosh, I mean, when we look at the money that goes to religious organizations.
Faith in Action right here in town, in DC, rather.
It's mind-boggling how much money goes to them, but people tithe.
Yeah.
And they send in their money, and that's part of their whole religious belief. Unfortunately, as atheists, people joke about how we're like cats, and herding cats is very difficult. I don't think we're quite that bad. Cats can be trained too. Just get a can of tuna and bang on it with a can opener. Maybe that's what we need to do a little bit more of. But the idea of taking just a small amount of your normal income and donating it to the organization or a couple of organizations that you agree with what they're doing, the projects that they have going. And there's so many great organizations.
So many. American Humanist Association's another great one.
They're right here in DC. CFI, great organization.
Their core mission.
Yep, and Secular Student Alliance.
Secular Student Alliance is very important.
Yeah, getting getting students involved, and the students tend to also be ones that express a lot of anger, but they also counter that with having a lot of fun together. But they love debate. They love to go in and do those debating, and I'm at the age now I'd rather not debate.
Well, I wish I knew as much as I did when I was 19 years old.
I think as we pass midlife, can we say that, anger does tend to dissipate a little bit more, and a little bit more pragmatic, but that's good. The young people, we need them to keep reminding us of what yet hasn't been accomplished.
Absolutely. But a lot of them who haven't been immersed in religion so much, and a lot of them are not immersed the way we were. For a lot of us growing up in
Texas,
the panhandle of Texas, first question most people will ask you is, what church do you go to?
Right. See,
and so there's that pressure all the time.
And I didn't grow up with that. And so it was very difficult for me to appreciate how so many atheists felt, because I never was under that sort of pressure. It was not something, it was not something that we talked about. We knew that there were kids who went to Catholic school, who were Catholic. They went to Mass on Sunday, and there are others who were Jewish and others who were Protestant. And there was never no one talked about that sort of thing. We talked about sports. Are you more interested? Are you Angels fan or a Dodgers fan? I mean, that there's something we could really talk about and have some heated discussions on.
But just out talking to people anymore, you'll find, I know you've experienced this, I certainly have, is that a lot of people where you might be expecting a little pushback, they'll go, you'll find that atheist out there, like the woman in Oklahoma.
Right.
You run into more of them all the time.
Yeah, no, I just had a conversation with someone who I had no idea what their religious beliefs wasn't It was, and it, I don't know how, I can't remember quite how the conversation came up, but I said something, well, you can't be as hated as an atheist. And he says, no, actually I am one. So,
right.
You know,
meet them all the time.
You meet them all the time.
It's been a while since I've actually had a face-to-face confrontation, but several years ago, a neighbor I'd lived across the street from for over 3 years, somehow was unaware that I was an atheist. I was never shy about it, but somebody told him, and this guy was up in my face. His face was red. He was very angry. I thought he was going to swing on me. He was just so, he had apparently never met an atheist or didn't know.
No, he had met an atheist.
He had met, and it was just such a shocking thing to him. And this guy was no churchgoer. He was, you know.
Yeah, I wonder how much. I mean, one of the reasons why atheists have gotten a bad rap was during the McCarthy era. Again, this is, you know, going back to our history, the idea of the godless communist, and that had a lot to do with labeling atheism with communism. It became almost a synonym of one another. If you were an atheist, you obviously were communist, and vice versa. When in fact, you know, that's absolutely not true. You can be of any political sway. I think I've known one atheist communist in my entire life.
That's more than I have. More than me.
Yeah. So, and anyway, you know, the idea that atheists are only either extremely liberal or socialist. That's not true either. Libertarians are generally atheists.
And I've met a number of Republican atheists.
Lots of Republican atheists.
I don't get it, but they exist.
Well, I think there are members of the Republican Party who are doing what they can to get rid of the religious right. They've seen what it's done to trying to fix the party from the inside, because the Republican Party was not a religious party. It had been the Progressive Party.
I think it was Ronald Reagan that gave the Christian Coalition keys to the White House.
Well, and that had a lot to do with Jimmy Carter. The fact that Jimmy Carter ran as an evangelical, and he did get a lot of support from the evangelicals, and so the Republicans jumped on the bandwagon. So the Democrats were guilty of starting it first. Jimmy Carter was the first candidate for the presidency that really was strongly talking about his religious beliefs.
Well, and of course, Reagan's reliance on the Southern strategy and the enlistment of the Christian Coalition and the other extreme right-wing religious groups. And we see the damage that's done to our political process. It just seems it's out of control now.
But when you hear previous Republican candidates, they will, Goldwater, Eisenhower, Nixon, talking about you know, religion not belonging in government, that they had very little respect for these religious right-wingers. So it is a big change in the Republican Party in my lifetime.
Yeah. And you mentioned Kennedy earlier about having to make a statement in support of separation of church and state.
Right, exactly.
Very famously.
So if anybody has not, for those of you who have not seen the film, you can download it from the internet. It's a very, very good speech.
Sure, it's on YouTube.
I think it's probably one of Kennedy's best speeches that he ever gave, and I think it was in Houston or Dallas. But
it wasn't Dallas.
Wasn't Dallas. Dallas was not a good place for Kennedy.
No.
I believe it was in Houston, and it was in front of, you know, a lot of Protestant ministers who came from that kind of
who still had some regard for separation of church
and state, who still have.
And to be fair, we still see a lot of course, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, run by Reverend Barry Lynn.
Right, there are a lot of religious people who realize that separation of church and state is vital to their existence.
Exactly.
They don't want to see one religion win out. I mean, what exactly is Christianity anyway?
Yeah, really, which version of Christianity do you want to be the official one? That's a subtlety lost on a lot of people on that side. They just know the argument. You know, we're a Christian nation. That's all they know. They can't elaborate beyond that.
And then of course, you know, many Christians say, well, Catholics aren't Christian, and Mormons are not Christian, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't Christian. So the fact that you know, we do need to bring in these allies of ours the secular movement who are for secularism, that we can forge these alliances, and I think that's really important.
And of course, this denial of separation also plays right into atheists in the military, or the proselytization in the military by Christian extremists, for lack of a better word.
Right, and Jason Torpy's group, Military Atheists and Agnostics Foundation, he does quite a bit of work here in D.C., talking on the Hill, going to the Hill and lobbying for atheists and agnostic military individuals. And
I forget the other gentleman's name who spoke at Reason Rally.
Reason Rally, I can't, all of a sudden his...
I always forget his name, but he's, isn't he at the Pentagon right now? There's a big controversy about him, at least.
Oh, are you, I know who you're thinking of, not Matt Cherry, Weinstein.
Yes.
Mikey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Yes, and so he's been another one. He was based out in Colorado, and he did a lot of work with the Air Force Academy there. And there is a secular, that was a hotbed, and there is a secular group I've spoken to them at the Air Force Academy.
Right.
So yeah, there is certainly a lot of religiosity in the military that doesn't necessarily need to be there, and they are fighting back. But what we're talking about, people who might be in battle together, and the last thing you want to do is have anger between your troops over something like that.
That's why there'd be a lot less anger if people would keep religion a little bit more to themselves, because it's a constant source of friction. It's historically always been and always will be a source of friction. It's so unnecessary. We live in a system where everybody is welcome to have their religion, but you cannot force it on anybody else by force of law, except they're not totally on board with that. They would love to enforce it by law, some of them.
Some. And I think it's because they don't really think about it. They don't really think about the consequences of what happens if their religion doesn't happen to gain the power.
That's right. And they tend to treat, because of that, they tend to treat the military and the public schools as open forums for evangelism, as extended ministries. And that's one thing that really makes me angry, is the use of the schools and this attempt to put prayer back in the schools. They forget Murray v. Curlett, 1963, which was Madalyn Murray O'Hair's landmark case. And they just keep trying and trying and trying. The student-led prayer fiasco or scheme that they tried a few years ago, which was my entry into activism for atheists. Loudoun County, where I live, had signed on to, I forget if it was Falwell's or Robertson's scheme to have student-led spontaneous prayer.
Right, using that free speech issue.
It couldn't have been more orchestrated. But Loudoun County signed on. The ACLU sued them in about 10 minutes. They won that case in about 10 more minutes. And
every case we tend to win. One of the issues, though, with that is it costs money, especially if a school is being sued.
Yeah.
The example of Dover, Pennsylvania, the school district had to incur all those costs.
Of course.
And
same thing in Loudoun County.
And so we thought of it as this huge victory, but in many ways it was a Pyrrhic victory, because the school district went bust.
Yeah.
And that punished the children.
Yeah.
And when we think about the fact that there is a very strong component of the religious right who would like to see the destruction of the public school system.
Absolutely.
In fact, we saw that with the recent presidential debates. The first time ever, we're talking about one of the fundamental principles of a democracy is having public education. It's so critically important.
Free education for everybody, and this is a bad thing all of a sudden.
And this is a bad thing all of a sudden. It's shocking. It boggles the mind.
Exactly. Makes me angry.
Yeah, it makes me angry too. I do become pretty angry about the destruction of public education. I went to public school in California, and it was a great education, and it still is a good education. What we've neglected is are some of the issues that surround public schools and the pressures they're put under in terms of the costs.
Mm-hmm.
And most teachers are so dedicated, and they're not very well paid, and they do it out of love for education.
Know. Of all people to demonize, to vilify teachers, really just to satisfy some temporary political agenda,
Right.
you're going to demonize teachers.
Yeah.
You know, they should be heroes. They should make more than Congress people make.
Well, yes, I absolutely agree with that. In fact, right now, I think during this sequester, the Congress shouldn't be paid anything.
No, let's pay them by the hour. Let's pay them by the hour and make them subject to every law they pass.
That's right. It's pretty awful what we're going through. So that makes me angry too, is Congress sitting around and not being able to reach out across the aisle and discuss these issues like grown-ups.
And it's not hard to make the case in all these things when they're demonizing teachers and unions and anything on the left, that there is a religious basis to those arguments on the right too.
Yeah.
I can make that case. I frequently do make that case.
Okay. No, it's good to get people to educate people on these issues. Sometimes I think a lot of secularists and atheists are intimidated because the religious right, they train people to hear the arguments, and they give them little pamphlets of
Right.
how to argue against.
Well, the apologism.
Yeah, and so if you're not used to those kind of arguments, it's very difficult to argue or debate something that isn't based in logic.
Well, and two, when what the right does is continually try to make laws. Of course, laws that adversely affect women and your most personal choices about your life and your future, everything. And of course, it's no stretch at all to make the case that those are religion-based. But it's not just that. It's not just the anti-choice laws. It's not the anti-woman laws. Just so many other things about schools and about the military and about everything. And they're based on, these are religious-based. I just got to say, when you're making a law and you're basing it on the existence of a God, I got to see some proof. I think that should be mandatory. I need to see some proof. When you're trying to force my child to pray in school, I'm going to need to see some proof that God actually exists.
Right.
Otherwise, keep it out of there.
And which God is it?
Yeah, and which one?
Is it Thor?
Yeah.
Thor with his hammer?
I vote for Thor.
I might vote for Thor
Thor's
too.
my favorite.
I think if we had Thor
Or
back.
Odin, who pledged to save the world from ice giants.
Hey,
done.
There we
Mission
go.
accomplished, if I may.
Global warming, we need Odin back. Maybe we should start fighting for that for Congress.
Mission accomplished. Now, Jesus promised to save us from sin.
Yeah, actually, a little sin might be good.
Yeah, a little sin. Yeah. I know. All the fun people are going to hell.
Especially all the fun. It'll be a great party down there. I'd much rather go there but given that there is no hell, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but teaching children that is irresponsible in the extreme.
And that is evil too.
As a motive for morality, coercion. A terroristic coercion.
I had nightmares about not me going to hell, but someone I love going to hell. I was worried about it. They would end up in hell, and I couldn't understand how any loving God that I could be nicer than God, that I would never want anyone to suffer.
Well, when a debate degenerates into that, and somebody says, well, you're going to hell or something to that effect, I feel sorry for you after you're dead or something, some vague, veiled threat like that. When they say you're going to hell, that's just not a true story. It's just not true.
Yeah. Of course, we also get accused of being Satanists, and we have to explain to them that, actually, we don't believe in that either.
No, and by the way, Satan is another Christian god.
Yeah, that's another Christian god. He was a fallen angel, and another
just one of the gods that the first commandment says don't pay any attention to. Doesn't deny they exist. It says just don't worship them. Worship me.
I would rather see Congress putting their hand on the Constitution than putting their hand in a Bible when they swear in.
Yeah.
Which is not mandatory.
Oh, it's not in the Constitution, certainly.
It's not in the Constitution. It's a symbolic thing. It's not even part of the normal ritual of Congress. It's become
a custom,
a custom just to make the people happy from their party back home.
Well, from day one, they've ignored the First Amendment and have continued to do prayers and have a chaplain in there, which I assume we're paying for. I'm not 100% sure. But,
I honestly don't know, but I would imagine we are. At least it's taking time from them doing actual work.
And it's an official duty, more or less.
And if you think about, I mean, the difference between prayer and actually getting things done, prayer does absolutely nothing. Gets nothing done. It's a waste of time.
Well, it's a way to get credit for doing nothing.
Yeah. remember when Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins were down in Houston for the Atheist Alliance of America conference, and about 2 weeks before, I think Perry had led a big prayer day for rain in Texas. It had been going through a horrible drought that year. And the atheists show up, and Christopher Hitchens shows up, and Richard Dawkins is there, and it pours. It just absolutely poured. And we were hoping we might get a little credit for that, but we didn't.
Yeah, it would be fun to claim that that was a sign from somebody.
A sign from,
Sadly, to be honest, we can't do that. You know, and another thing that irritates me, makes me angry, so angry, is this argument that science and religion are kind of
compatible.
Different sides of the same coin, and they're compatible, non-overlapping magisteria or whatever they call it.
Thanks to Gould.
Yeah, and from my view, they're not just incompatible, they could not be in worse conflict.
Yeah, they're absolutely in worse conflict. But and again, it's a strategy that is interesting, and there are people on both sides. And I understand, political expediency. There are going to be some people who are, so religious they will fear science, and so they will try to block it. And so telling people that you can accept evolution while being religious, it doesn't click with me, but I can understand why, letting people see that, and there certainly are religious people I know who accept evolution.
Mm-hmm, certainly.
There's some, it helps our political ends. Mm-hmm. But as a scientist, and I definitely don't find that the two make sense, especially when it comes to biological evolution.
No, to call evolution fantasy and to call religion or creationism the actual science is just ludicrous in the extreme. Mm-hmm. And in Louisiana, they just seem intent on teaching creationism in the schools. This is settled even before Dover, Pennsylvania. In 1987, there was Edwards v. Aguilar, mm-hmm. which outlawed the teaching of creationism, saying that science is what scientists do, and creationism is not science, and it certainly is not what scientists do. It is religion. Could not be more clear-cut, and it was in Louisiana, even though it's a Supreme Court decision, so it's applicable, in 50 states, in all the territories. They just ignore it. They just plain old have refused to honor it. What do you do in that case?
Yeah, this is where, unfortunately, we end up wasting a lot of government money, a lot of state money in taking these things to trial. And I would hope maybe one way of fighting against this is to remind taxpayers that they're going to lose. Yeah. They're throwing their money good after bad. And that's how, when we look at what happened in Kansas, when Kansas came out with this very strong statement of, against evolution, and that the whole school board got eventually tossed out, who were pro-creationism, anti-evolution. The voters need to step up to the plate and say, stop wasting my tax dollars on these ridiculous fights that you will lose. And especially, times are hard, crops are bad, and we need to keep all of our money going toward things that are actually useful and not in these ridiculous arguments that we win consistently each and every time.
And they just refuse to comply with. It kind of reminds me of an old episode of WKRP in Cincinnati, again, showing my age. They're confronting an angry religious group. outside, and they're up in the lobby, and they say, we cannot be counted on to behave responsibly. And so we're confronted with them just ignoring the law.
Yeah.
And our alternative is let them get away with it or sue and spend a lot of money that didn't have to be spent, that it was irresponsible to have to spend, but it's not our irresponsibility, it's theirs, and we pay for it.
Yeah, and often I think one tactic too is when we do go up against someplace like Louisiana, is to remind everyone, this is going to cost you. We are going to sue because you're breaking the Constitution, and this is the estimate of what Dover cost. You know, here's what Dover cost. Here's what Aguilar cost. Do you really want to waste your money on this? And I think
dare you
that
just ignore the law.
And you know, people can be practical. There's the emotional side, and people think, oh yes, we need to teach the controversy. And you have to give the religious right credit. I mean, they came up with this great slogan.
They're good at
and
slogans.
You know, we're Americans. We want to be able to have debate, but the fact is, we're also pragmatists. And you start talking bottom dollar, and you start saying, oh, well, yeah, the emotional thing of, oh, religion should have its, you know, we should be able to teach things like creationism because some people believe in that, and evolution's just a theory.
Well, teach it at church. Let's teach that controversy in church.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go to church and
Let's
start
go there.
talking the controversy there. But let's be a good strategist too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, instead of the emotional issue, let's go straight to the bottom line and start reminding people this is going to cost you. Instead of your tax dollar going to fix that pothole in the front of your home, it's going to defend something that you know you're going to lose.
Yep.
And if you want to spend your money on, waste your money on emotions, then that's your decision. But I bet most people, most citizens are going to go, oh, my back pocket, that's not good for emotions.
Well, as we become normalized and more accepted, when the president gives us a shout out every couple of speeches or so, you know.
Appreciate that.
Slowly but surely we are making some headway. I think we're winning, actually.
I think we are too. We're seeing
demographic twist. And we're actually going to have to cut it off there.
Well, that makes me angry.
And me. It's Road to Reason. Look us up on Facebook and on
Twitter.
YouTube and Twitter. And read your Bible.
Yeah, read your Bible. It's good for you, and it'll cure you of
makes atheists.
Makes atheists. Bye.
See you next time.